Welcome back to the deep dive. We are really glad you're here with us today.
We are.
Usually we're sifting through the latest tech headlines or maybe trying to make sense of some complex business strategy.
Right, or a new piece of legislation.
But today we are zooming out, way out.
We are leaving the modern world behind entirely. We're taking a trip back into deep time.
And I have to say, looking at the research for this one, it feels less like a history lesson and more like a crime scene investigation.
It really does.
A really, really big crime scene.
It is the ultimate cold case. And the scale of it is something that is, genuinely hard to wrap your head around.
Right.
We often hear about extinction events in pop culture. It's almost a buzzword. But what we're talking about today, it puts everything else into perspective.
It really does, because when I say mass extinction, I know exactly where your brain goes. It goes to the dinosaurs.
Yep, the T-Rex.
The T-Rex looking up at the sky, you see the streak of light, the big boom, the asteroid. It's cinematic, it's dramatic, and it's the one everyone knows.
The Cretaceous-Paleogene event. It definitely had the best PR campaign for an extinction. But here's the thing.
What's that?
As bad as that day was for the dinosaurs, it wasn't the worst day Earth has ever had.
Oh.
Not even close.
And that is the hook that got me. We are talking about an event that makes the death of the dinosaurs look like, what, a minor fender bender?
Exactly. This event was so catastrophic, so thorough in its destruction that scientists, they give it a nickname.
And it is a nickname that sounds like it belongs in a heavy metal song.
The Great Dying.
The Great Dying. Just saying it gives you chills.
It's an evocative name, for sure, but it's also scientifically accurate. We're talking about the Permian-Triassic extinction event.
Okay.
And the stakes here weren't just about losing some big lizards. The stakes were the continuation of life itself. This event didn't just prune the tree of life.
No.
It took a chainsaw to the trunk.
So that is our mission for this deep dive. We need to uncover how life on this planet was almost completely wiped out. We need to identify the culprit. And spoiler alert, it is not just a stray rock from space. And then we need to understand the incredibly difficult long road to recovery. Because we are here, so obviously life made it back. But it was a close call.
It was the closest call we've ever had.
So let's set the scene. We're hopping in the time machine. Where are we going?
We're traveling back approximately 251.9 million years.
251.9 million years ago, okay.
And this is a critical boundary line in geology.
Cool.
It marks the end of the Permian period, which is the final chapter of the Paleozoic era.
Paleozoic meaning ancient life, right?
Ancient life, and it marks the beginning of the Triassic period, which starts the Mesozoic era or middle life.
So this event is literally the dividing line between ancient history and the age of reptiles.
Exactly. But before that line is crossed, the world looks very different from today. The continents aren't spread out like they are now.
No, they're all smashed together.
Smashed together into one massive supercontinent called Pangaea.
All land in one place.
And surrounding it is one massive global ocean called Panthalassa. It was a world teeming with life. On land, you had these vast forests. You had huge amphibians.
Wow.
You had the ancestors of mammals, the synapsids dominating the ecosystem. It was a lush, thriving planet.
And then everything went wrong. So let's talk about the scale of this cataclysm. When you say the Great Dying, give me the body count.
The statistics they're staggering. They are almost impossible to visualize.
Okay, try me.
If we look at the marine environment, so life in the ocean, we lost about 81% of all marine species.
81%. Let's just pause on that. If you're swimming in a reef with 10 different types of fish, 8 of them are gone tomorrow.
Gone. Correct. And on land, it wasn't much better. We lost about 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species.
The animals with backbones.
Yep. But to really understand the depth of this, you have to look higher up the chain. At the taxonomy, we didn't just lose species.
What else?
We lost 57% of all biological families and 52% of all genera.
Okay, I remember a biology class. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Losing a species is one thing, but losing a family, that's a huge category, isn't it?
It's huge. To put it in perspective, the Felidae family includes all cats.
Yeah.
Lions, tigers, house cats, leopards, everything.
All of them.
Losing a family is like wiping out every single type of cat on Earth in one go. That is the level of biodiversity loss we are talking about.
That is terrifying. It's a biological collapse.
And there is one detail from this that I find particularly chilling. This event is the greatest known mass extinction of insects.
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 See, that is where I start to get worried. Because in my head, insects are the survivors. You know, you always hear that joke that if we blow ourselves up with nukes, the cockroaches will inherit the earth.
In almost every other extinction event, insects generally scrape by. They are resilient, they reproduce fast.
Sure.
But the Great Dying was so severe, so all-encompassing, that it hammered the insect world too. It is the only time in history we have seen a mass crash of insect populations.
That tells you there was nowhere to hide.
Nowhere.
Not in the water, not on land, not even in the cracks where the bugs live.
Exactly. The devastation was total.
I want to look at the victims a little closer. We had these dry percentages, but who were these creatures? Who did we lose forever?
Well, in the oceans, the losses they were heartbreaking for paleontologists. The most iconic victim has to be the trilobite.
Oh, the trilobites. I love those things. They look like little armored pill bugs. You see them in every museum gift shop.
They do, and for good reason. Trilobites had been the kings of the ocean since the Cambrian period. I mean, they've been around for hundreds of millions of years.
They survived other stuff.
They had survived ice ages. They had survived other extinctions. They were a success story.
And the Great Dying just erased them.
Completely. 100% extinction. They never made it into the Triassic.
That is tragic. The end of an era.
It really is. And they weren't alone. We lost the Eurypterids.
The sea scorpions.
Yes. The sea scorpions.
Yeah.
Gone. We lost the blastoids, which were a type of echinoderm kind of related to starfish, but they looked like little armored flower buds.
Also gone.
Gone.
So what about the survivors? Did anything make it through unscathed?
Very, very few. Even the groups that survived were absolutely decimated. Take the brachiopods.
They look like clams, right?
They look a bit like clams, but they have a different internal anatomy. They were incredibly diverse and abundant in the Permian.
And after?
They suffered a 96% loss.
96%. That is basically extinction. That is hanging on by a single thread.
It is. Ammonites are another example. Those are the shelled cephalopods, the ones with the cool spiral shells.
Okay, yeah.
They suffered a 97% loss. They barely scraped through.
Is there a pattern here? I mean, was the killer picking and choosing? Or was it just random bad luck?
Oh no, there's a very strong pattern, and it gives us a major clue about what happened. The extinction primarily targeted organisms with calcium carbonate skeletons.
Calcium carbonate, so things that build shells.
Precisely. Corals, shellfish, sponges that build hard structures. These groups were hit disproportionately hard.
Okay, I am going to put a pin in that. Shell builders dying. That sounds like a chemistry problem.
It is absolutely a chemistry problem. It points us directly toward ocean acidification.
Right.
But before we get to the how, we have to finish surveying the damage on land.
Okay, right. We mentioned the insects, but what about the plants? I mean, a world without plants is a world without food.
The plant life took a massive hit. In the southern hemisphere, on the part of Pangaea we call Gondwana, there were these vast dominant forests made up of a tree called Glossopteris.
Glossopter.
It was a type of seed fern. It covered the continent. And during this extinction, the Glossopteris forests essentially collapsed. They just vanished.
Wow.
And we know this because of a very strange gap in the geological record. We call it the coal gap.
The coal gap. Now, when I hear that, I think of an energy crisis. But you are talking about rocks, right?
I am. Coal is formed from peat, which is basically dead plant matter that doesn't fully decay.
Right, gets buried and compressed.
Over millions of years, yeah. We have huge coal deposits from the Permian period. But right at the boundary of the extinction, the coal stops.
It just cuts off.
For millions of years into the early Triassic, there are almost no coal deposits found anywhere on Earth.
Because there were no trees to die and turn into coal?
Exactly. The peat-forming plants were wiped out. The global forests were decimated to the point that the geological process of making coal essentially just paused.
That's mind-blowing. We literally ran out of the raw material for fossil fuels because the biosphere was so broken.
It paints a picture of barren landscape. Imagine a world where the forests have turned to rot and the new growth just isn't coming back.
So we've established the crime scene, and it is grim. Empty oceans, barren continents, no coal being made, trilobites gone forever.
It's bad.
Now we need to put on our detective hats. Who is the prime suspect?
Well, naturally, everyone looks for the creator first.
Right. The dinosaur precedent, you have to.
Since we figured out the dinosaur extinction was caused by the Chicxulub impact, scientists have asked, where is the crater for the Great Dying?
Did they find one?
There have been candidates. There is a site in Brazil called the Araguaia crater.
Arguina. Is it big?
It's about 40 kilometers wide.
That sounds big to me.
It is big, but compared to the dinosaur killer, which was 180 kilometers wide,
Yeah.
it's small.
Ah. Okay.
Most researchers argue it just isn't big enough to cause 81% of marine life to die globally. Some theories suggest it might have hit an oil shale area and released some methane.
So like an accomplice, maybe.
Maybe an accomplice or a trigger. But the consensus is that a rock from space was not the main culprit.
So if the danger didn't come from above, it must have come from below.
That is where the evidence leads. The prime suspect is a massive volcanic event known as the Siberian Traps.
The Siberian Traps. It sounds like a bad place to get stuck in a spy movie. But we're talking about volcanoes.
We are. But we need to be very careful with the word volcano. When I say volcano, you picture a cone-shaped mountain, right? Like Mount Fuji or Mount St. Helens, blowing its top.
Sure. Lava flowing down the side.
This wasn't that. This was a large igneous province.
Large igneous province? That sounds formidable.
Imagine the Earth's crust just cracking open. Massive fissures, kilometers long, opening up in what is now Siberia.
Okay.
And out of these fissures comes a flood of basalt lava.
A flood of lava.
And it didn't just erupt for a week or a month or even a year. This continued in pulses for hundreds of thousands of years.
Just endless lava. How much are we talking about?
The scale is hard to comprehend. We are talking about millions of cubic kilometers of lava.
Give me a comparison.
Enough to bury the entire continental United States under hundreds of feet of rock.
Okay. That is a lot of lava. That creates a new landscape. But lava stays where it flows, right? If I'm a trilobite in the ocean on the other side of the world or a bug in Antarctica, why do I care about lava in Siberia?
That is the key question. It wasn't the lava itself that killed the world. The lava was just the delivery mechanism. The real weapon was the exhaust fume.
The gas.
The atmosphere. These eruptions release massive amounts of sulfur dioxide and, crucially, carbon dioxide.
We hear a lot about CO2 today. It's the main driver of our current climate change. What kind of numbers are we talking about back then?
Well, atmospheric CO2 levels just skyrocketed. Estimates suggest they went from roughly 400 parts per million, which is actually similar to where we were just a few years ago.
Wow.
Up to perhaps 2,500 ppm or even more.
That is a 6-fold increase.
It's huge. And along with that massive blanket of CO2 came global warming. Global temperatures rose by approximately 8 degrees Celsius.
Which is about 15 degrees Fahrenheit?
Something like that, yeah.
14 degrees Fahrenheit average rise. That isn't just a heat wave. That changes the entire physics of the climate system.
It completely destabilizes it. But here's the kicker. It wasn't just the magma releasing gas. The Siberian traps were unique because of where they erupted.
Location.
Exactly. They didn't just erupt through solid granite. They erupted through a sedimentary basin that was rich in coal, oil, and gas deposits.
Wait. So the volcano literally erupted through the Earth's fuel tank?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
The magma baked and burned these massive ancient deposits of fossil fuels. It cooked the coal. This released even more greenhouse gases, methane, and CO2 than the magma alone would have produced.
It was like lighting a match in a gas station.
Perfect analogy.
So you have the volcano's natural gas plus the burning of millions of years of stored carbon. That explains the spike.
Right. So now we have a superheated planet. But how does that translate to the kill mechanism in the ocean? You mentioned the shells dissolving earlier. This is the domino effect. We can trace the murder weapon step by step. The first domino is hypercapnia and acidification.
Unpack those for me.
The ocean acts like a sponge for the atmosphere. It absorbs CO2.
Okay.
When CO2 dissolves in water, it creates carbonic acid. This lowers the pH of the ocean.
It makes the water acidic.
Right. And this is where the shell builders get into trouble. If you are a coral or a brachipod, you build your shell out of calcium carbonate. But in acidic water, calcium carbonate becomes unstable.
It gets harder to build your house.
It becomes metabolically very expensive to build your shell. You're spending all your energy just trying to hold your body together.
And at some point,
in extreme cases, the water becomes so corrosive that shells actually start to dissolve.
So the backbone of the reef ecosystem just crumbles.
That's domino number one. Domino number two is anoxia.
Anoxia means no oxygen.
Yes, and there's a simple rule of physics. Warm water cannot hold as much dissolved oxygen as cold water.
Like a warm soda going flat faster than a cold one?
Perfect. The gas escapes. So as the planet heats up 14 degrees, the oceans lose their breath.
They start to suffocate.
Circulation slows down, and the oxygen levels plummet. The fish, the sharks, the active swimmers, they start to suffocate. But then It gets even worse.
Oh, of course it does.
Domino number 3 is euxenia.
Euxinia. That is a word you don't hear every day.
It is a terrifying state for the ocean. In these warm, oxygen-free zones, normal life dies. But something else thrives.
What's that?
Anaerobic bacteria.
Bacteria that don't need oxygen.
Specifically, bacteria that breathe sulfate and release hydrogen sulfide as waste.
Hydrogen sulfide. That's the rotten egg smell.
It is. But at high concentrations, it is lethal. It is toxic to almost all eukaryotic life. So large parts of the ocean essentially turned into a stagnant, poisonous, purple soup smelling of rotten eggs.
It sounds like something out of a horror movie. Acidic, hot, suffocating, toxic purple water.
And it might not have stayed in the water. Some computer models suggest that this hydrogen sulfide gas could have bubbled out of the ocean and into the atmosphere.
You're kidding? Poison gas clouds drifting over the land.
It's possible. It would have poisoned land animals and plants. And it leads us to another accomplice.
What's that?
The destruction of the ozone layer.
Which protects us from the sun's radiation.
Correct. The volcanic gases, and possibly the hydrogen sulfide, could have shredded the ozone layer. This would bathe the planet in harmful ultraviolet B radiation.
And we have evidence for this.
We do. And it's really strange evidence. Scientists have found fossilized pollen grains from this specific time period that are mutated.
Mutated pollen.
The grains are malformed, they have extra sacs, or they're fused together in weird ways. These mutations are exactly what you expect to see when plants are exposed to high levels of UV radiation. It damages their DNA.
So let's recap the conditions on Earth. You have lava covering a continent. You have heat spiking 14 degrees. You have acid rain. You have oceans turning into a poison soup. And you have radiation frying the DNA of the plants on land.
It's just one thing after another.
Yeah.
Cascade of catastrophes.
It's like the planet was actively trying to kill everything.
It really was. And we haven't even mentioned the other potential accomplices.
There's more.
There's the methane clathrate theory.
The methane burp.
Methane clathrates are these frozen deposits of methane ice that exist on the ocean floor. The theory is that as the oceans warmed up, these deposits melted.
Releasing the gas.
And releasing it fast.
Yeah.
Methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas than CO2.
Yeah.
So if you have a sudden burp of methane, it causes a rapid spike in temperature, which melts more clathrates.
It's a feedback loop.
Exactly. And there is even a theory about microbes, the methanogen theory.
Is that the one about the nickel?
Yes. A study from MIT proposed that a specific type of microbe, a methanogen, evolved a new way to eat organic matter right at this time. But they needed nickel to do it.
And guess what the Siberian traps released tons of?
Nickel. So you might have had a biological explosion of these microbes, fed by volcanic minerals, releasing vast amounts of methane into the atmosphere.
It is a perfect storm. Geological triggers, chemical reactions, biological explosions.
And speaking of biology, we have to mention the fungal spike.
That sounds like a horror movie title.
It refers to a layer in the rock record where paleontologists found a sudden, massive abundance of fungal spores.
Why fungus?
Well, what does fungus eat?
Dead stuff.
Exactly. The hypothesis was that the world was so full of rotting trees and dead animals that fungi temporarily took over the planet. It was a world of rot.
That is disgusting, a planet covered in mold.
Now, I should clarify, some recent research suggests these might be algae called Reduviaspirinites, not fungi, which would suggest a swampy, stagnant world.
Either way, it's not good.
No. But the image of a world in decay remains powerful and likely accurate.
So that is the how, the mechanism of death. But clearly life didn't end. We were sitting here having this conversation. Someone survived.
This brings us to the aftermath. And I think this is the part people underestimate. We tend to think, okay, the disaster ends and life bounces back.
Like a forest fire. The green shoots come up the next spring?
This wasn't like a forest fire. This was a broken world. The recovery was incredibly slow. It took millions of years for complex ecosystems to return.
It's so long. What took so much time?
Because the conditions didn't just snap back to normal. The heat and the ocean acidity persisted. In fact, for a long time in the early Triassic, the tropics were essentially a dead zone.
Too hot to live.
Yes. Sea surface temperatures may have exceeded 40 degrees Celsius. That's 104 degrees Fahrenheit.
That is hot tub temperature.
It is. Fish can't live in a hot tub. Proteins start to break down. Metabolisms fail. So for millions of years, most life was pushed away from the equator towards the poles.
The middle of the planet was a ghost town.
Basically. But there were survivors. You mentioned disaster taxa.
Yes.
A disaster taxon is a species that thrives not because it's the best or the strongest, but because there is no competition. The poster child for this is an animal called Lystrosaurus.
Lystrosaurus, I've seen pictures. It's not winning any beauty contests.
No. Imagine a pig-sized creature with a shovel-shaped face and two little tusks. It was a synapsid, so it's actually a distant relative of ours.
A pig lizard cousin.
And it was a burrower. It ate roots. And somehow it survived the apocalypse. And because there were no predators left and no other herbivores to compete with, it exploded in population.
How abundant are we talking?
For a while in the early Triassic, Lystrosaurus accounted for something like 90% of all terrestrial vertebrates.
90%.
If you walked across the supercontinent of Pangaea, 9 out of every 10 animals you saw would be a Lystrosaurus.
Ooh.
It is the definition of failing upwards.
Yeah.
It just inherited the Earth because everyone else died.
That is wild. A world of just one animal, basically.
And the survivors that did make it, they changed. There is a phenomenon called the Lilliput effect.
Like Gulliver's Travels, the tiny people.
Exactly. We see this in the fossil record.
Yeah.
The surviving species physically shrank
They got smaller.
dramatically.
Right.
Brachiopods, clams, even the vertebrates, everything got smaller.
Why? Why would that happen?
It's likely a response to stress. Smaller bodies need less food. They need less oxygen. And in a dangerous world, it pays to reproduce young and fast. You don't have time to grow big. So evolution selected for the runts.
So the post-apocalyptic world was hot, empty, and filled with tiny, stunted animals.
Mostly. But nature is resilient. Eventually, the world healed, the chemistry stabilized, and the empty spaces allowed new groups to rise.
The new world.
The extinction cleared the stage. The ancient Paleozoic incumbents were gone. And into that vacuum stepped the Archosaurs.
The ancestors of the dinosaurs.
Yes. If the Great Dying hadn't happened, the large synapsids might have kept their dominance. We might never have had the Jurassic period as we know it. The vacuum allowed the Archosaurs to diversify, to grow, and eventually to become the dinosaurs.
So in a dark, twisted way, we have the Siberian traps to thank for the T-Rex.
And eventually, for the rise of mammals when the dinosaurs had their own bad day later on.
It's a game of musical chairs. The music stops, a bunch of species get shoved off, and the survivors take the seats.
That is a perfect analogy.
So we've covered the what, the who, the how, and the aftermath. Now comes the big question, the so what. Why does an event from 252 million years ago matter to us today?
It matters because of the mechanism. When we look at the dinosaur extinction, that was an asteroid. That is a freak accident. We can watch the skies for asteroids.
Right, but the Great Dying wasn't an accident.
The Great Dying was a carbon-driven climate catastrophe. It was caused by the rapid injection of CO2 into the atmosphere.
Which sounds very familiar.
It is frighteningly familiar. The processes, rapid global warming, ocean acidification, deoxygenation, these are the exact same physical and chemical processes we are observing today.
The chemistry doesn't care if the carbon comes from a volcano burning coal or a power plant burning coal.
Exactly. The molecule is the same. The effect is the same. Geologist Lee Kump put it very well. He called the Permian-Triassic extinction a stark reminder of the consequences of rapid carbon emissions.
But surely the volcanoes released way more carbon than we are.
They release more total carbon, yes. But here is the scary part. We are releasing it faster. The rate of our emissions today is higher than the rate of the Siberian traps.
That is sobering.
It is. The rock record shows us the worst-case scenario. It shows us that the Earth system has tipping points. Once you push the ocean into anoxia, once you melt the methane clathrates, the system spirals out of control. And it doesn't fix itself on a human timescale. It takes millions of years.
We're poking the dragon.
We are. And the Great Dying is the warning sign posted on the cage.
But I want to end on a slightly provocative thought. You mentioned resilience earlier. Life didn't vanish.
No. Life is incredibly stubborn. 96% of marine species died, but that 4% rebuilt the biosphere. They created a new world.
But it was a different world.
Completely different. The world that recovered was alien compared to the one that died. The dominant players were gone.
And that is the thought I want our listeners to chew on. We humans like to think we are the masters of the planet. We are the dominant species.
Right.
But 252 million years ago, the trilobites were dominant. The synapsids were dominant.
Dominance is fragile. If 90+% of life can vanish, it reminds us that we're just tenants here, and the lease could be terminated.
On that cheery note. No, but seriously, it is a reminder to respect the delicate balance of our atmosphere. It's the only one we've got.
Absolutely. The past is the key to the future. We would be wise to read the warning signs written in the rocks.
Well, this has been a heavy one, but a fascinating one. The Great Dying. It really puts a traffic jam or a bad meeting into perspective, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Just be glad the oceans aren't purple.
I am very glad the oceans aren't purple. Thanks for guiding us through the apocalypse. And thank you to our listeners for diving deep with us.
Thank you.
See you on the next deep dive. Stay curious and maybe go plant a tree.
Couldn't hurt.